Welcome back to Scary Bear Attacks. Today's episode takes us to the east side of the world-renowned YellowStone National Park, which straddles the borders of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. Yellowstone National Park features some of the most well-preserved natural ecosystems remaining in the modern world. The area is crowded with bison, moose, black and brown bear, wolves, and cougar, not to mention the plentiful deer, elk, and antelope. Each of these species offer their own degree of beauty and danger. Brian Matayoshi from Torrence, California was 57 years old and had recently retired as a pharmacist. Brian and his wife Marylyn were on their fourth visit to Yellowstone National Park and about halfway through their planned 3-week trip. The date was July 6th of 2011 and the time was around 11 a.m. The couple was approximately 1.5 kilometers down the Wapiti Lake Trail. They encountered a fellow hiker who allowed them to use his binoculars to view a sow grizzly and her 2 cubs from about 500 yards, an appropriate distance to view such dangerous predators. The couple had never spotted a bear in their previous visits, so this was a special treat for them. They took photos and continued down the trail. They had no idea that the bears they just photographed would be only 20 minutes from an appointment with destiny which would change each of their lives. The pair traveled down the trail about a quarter of a mile when they were fogged with a swarm of mosquitoes and decided to turn back the way they came. As they approached the area they previously saw the sow and cubs, they noticed the trio of bears was now a mere 100 yards from the trail they were on. Brian and Marylyn navigated a dense stand of lodgepole pine only to emerge just across from a grassy meadow from the bears. The sow bear, now in protection mode, trotted toward the couple, inducing instant panic. Brian turned toward Marylyn and yelled, "Run!" They had no bear spray nor a firearm to fall back on, so they immediately began running away and yelling as the sow and cubs pursued out of curiosity or potentially another motive. As Brian and Marylyn entered the trailhead, they had passed signs warning of bear activity in the area and reminding hikers and photographers to lay down and play dead if involved in a confrontation with a bear, and to use bear spray as a last resort. Now the sow was closing in on them, and they had forgotten any instruction as they were convinced that they were in extreme danger. Most people consciously know that they cannot outrun a bear, but once fear dominates the mind, options become limited and panic prevails. The sow caught Brian about 270 yards into the pursuit and tackled him to the ground. Marylyn hid behind a fallen tree and tried to envision herself anywhere else but where she was. She lifted her head just in time to see the bear punch Brian in the head and knock him down again. Witnesses a few hundred yards away indicated Brian made animal sounds while being attacked, possibly in an attempt to frighten the bear or in mimicry of his attacker. The cubs were reportedly growling as they watched their mom bite and claw Brian, according to Marylyn. The sow spent a few minutes biting and clawing Brian's body as he fought her attack fruitlessly before Marylyn rose to her knees to adjust her camera position. She had laid on it as she collapsed behind the log and was now moving it from protruding into her side. The sow trotted over to Marylyn, who had begun to play dead by falling face first onto the ground. The sow picked Marylyn up by her backpack and slammed her into the ground to see if there was a reaction. The woman remained still, and the sow broke off the attack. It seemed as if the bear had to impart a final bit of intimidation to the woman before feeling confident enough to leave safely with her cubs. Marylyn quickly ran to Brian's side and improvised a tourniquet to Brian's wounded knee from a jacket. Brian released one last deep breath and was still. His life had ebbed as she tried to save him. He was motionless and unresponsive when a hiker in the area who was a trauma surgeon called 911. He was positioned just a few hundred yards away and somehow managed to get signal enough for the call while Marylyn's 21 attempts failed. Authorities declined to perform an autopsy on Brian as his fatal injuries were obvious. He had a large gash and hematoma on his forehead from the blunt force trauma of the bear's punch. His femoral artery was also severed from the bite on his knee, causing rapid insanguination. The park authorities concluded the uncollared and untagged sow was acting defensively and had no previous acts of aggression toward humans, so they would not euthanize her nor her cubs. The Yellowstone National Park area is reported to be home to about 600 grizzly bears. The aggravating conditions regarding this incident included a deeper-than-normal snowpack, which forced the bears into lower elevations for browse, as well as pushing brown bears out of Yellowstone National Park into lower elevations surrounding the park. This incident resulted in the first bear attack fatality in Yellowstone National Park in 25 years.